Really, Singapore has worked a number of calibrated responses that we can divide into three broad buckets. Uh, Firstly, we sought very hard to reduce the number of cases that are imported from overseas. Secondly, there was a very strenuous effort to identify local cases quickly and to minimize any community spread. And thirdly, social distancing measures were also put in place to mitigate the impact of really any community spread. So if you look at all the dozen odd measures that Singapore had taken, they can be bucketed into one of these three really strategic goals.
And of course, it's the lessons learned from the SARS epidemic, which has helped countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taiwan to be proactive in dealing with this crisis.
Well, absolutely. I would say that for many of us, the experience of SARS has been viscerally seared into our consciousness, both individually and also collectively. And out of the experience of SARS, Singapore had really worked very hard to improve the infrastructure, and we were very fortunate that the National Center for Infectious Disease opened only last year, adding capacity of about 300 beds into the system. Secondly, Singapore also augmented the expertise and we have sent people overseas to be trained in epidemiology, to spend time with the US CDC and with the World Health Organization. And lastly, annually we do have drills to almost like war games to get the public as well as the professionals prepared and in a state of constant readiness. I think that all of these have greatly helped us as we try to deal with the COVID-19 outbreak.
And I understand contact tracing is also very sophisticated in Singapore. The public are provided updates very regularly.
No, I would say that the contact tracing, there is some element of really technological sophistication, but a lot of it is really down to just thoroughness and applying enough resources. And here I think Singapore has done very well. It has mobilized not just health ministry officials, but we've also mobilized the police force and other resources to help with the contact tracing. And almost on an hour by hour basis, on a 24/7, we have managed to get hold of every case and trace the close contacts and do the necessary contact tracing. So I would say that we've been helped by the technology, but it's really around the meticulousness and being very, very thorough about it.
And Singapore has yet to close schools. What's the reasoning behind this?
Well, we have decided to not close schools really because there is limited evidence so far that this will help given the low infection amongst children locally. And closing schools is very disruptive from a societal point of view, and it's really striking that right balance of what are the public health benefits versus the societal disruptions. But that said, Singapore has been preparing for this possibility. Schools are all fully prepared to move into online learning, and students and parents are constantly being cautioned that we might close schools, and hence the disruption would then be minimized.
At what point will Singapore close schools?
Well, I would say that we would seriously look at it when we have widespread really community transmission that is unlinked to any of the current cases. Then to break this cycle, the option to close schools would then become very, very real and very seriously looked at.
Now, the island state has managed to avoid COVID-19 related deaths so far. What would you put this down to? Is it the healthcare system? Is it educating the public on how to mitigate risks? Is it a combination of these?
Well, it's likely it is a combination of all of these at a healthy dose of just plain old luck. We have been aggressive right from the early stages in all the measures that we had discussed. But if we look at Singapore's rates of admission into the intensive care units, we're not very different from other countries. And hence, it does signal to us that the severity of the cases that we have been seeing are not different from many other countries. And I think that nationally, everyone from our Prime Minister down has been cautioning Singaporeans that some fatalities are probably inevitable, and we should be mentally and emotionally prepared for this.
Singapore has a much smaller population than many European countries and the US. Can its COVID-19 policies be applied and be effective in areas with much larger populations?
Well, I would say that every country is unique. It's got its own geography, its own political and health infrastructure, but some lessons would be fairly universal. And I think that what the Singapore experience really signals is that speed, the effectiveness of the implementation, trusted government, trust between government and the people, between government and business, and the ability to make really dynamic changes in real time as the situation develops. These are some of the critical ingredients that have helped Singapore so far.
And which other countries would you be most concerned about in terms of the handling of the pandemic?
Well, if we look at at the countries where the government has exercised travel advisories, these are the countries that we're probably most concerned about, and we probably look at it from really two really domains. One, just how comprehensive the country's control measures have been, and the amount of trade and people flow between Singapore and really these countries. And hence, yesterday evening, the government announced a set of travel or border controls for all of the Southeast Asian nations. So that's really a major concern to us around possible second waves.
Dr. Lim, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Now, the Philippines has imposed strict home